Okay, so thanks for joining everyone. From XLCubed today, we have myself, Gary Crawford, and my colleague, Catherine Friends. So I expect we have a very high percentage of people working from home on the call today. With the coronavirus situation, it's a concerning time for us all, and we fundamentally hope you all stay safe as the situation unfolds. Moving on to today's webinar, I trust it proves useful and gives you some inspiration in terms of your reporting needs. So having launched version 10 last week, we've had some very good initial feedback, and we're looking forward to walking you through some of the key charting capabilities today. The charts draw on the research and recommendations of the IBCS, which stands for the International Business Communication Standards. It's a well-known organization in the German-speaking part of Europe, and it's starting to spread a lot more widely now. I'd certainly recommend you take a look at their website for some more background, but they've got a wide range of recommended approaches for chart layout, which chart types to use in specific scenarios. They also strongly recommend taking a standardized approach to charting and basically ensuring that what looks the same means the same across different reports. So in a business situation, you'll have a wide range of differing reports, but if you're always displaying certain metrics the same way, the idea is that the entire group of reports become much easier to assimilate and much quicker to understand. So we do intend to have XLCubed, the product, IBCS certified in the next few months. So keep your eyes open for that side of things. And I think overall, the chart types that we've introduced with version 10, they're particularly focused around financial reporting, hence the session today. So we got some common use cases that we've categorized the new chart types into. The first would be around variance analysis. So whether that is actual to budget, actual to plan, forecast, whatever it may be, or whether it's a comparison of this period to previous periods. We have a number of different chart types to really display that type of core information very well. And obviously it's one of the most common needs really within financial reports. We've also got contribution analysis, which is really the realm of waterfall charts. And I'm sure there are many people on the call today who've spent more hours and days than they'd care to remember building waterfall charts in older versions of Excel, which was a very slow, painful process. Easier in new versions of Excel, but obviously there's still quite a lot of limitations there. So we've really got two types of waterfall chart, and we'll walk through those. We also cover what we call business scenario reporting, so standardized ways to depict actual plan forecast so that you can consistently understand what you're looking at, and also some charts around time series and structural. And it'll actually be the first two that we focus on primarily in the session today. And then towards the end, I'm going to pass over to my colleague Catherine, who's going to give you an example of how you can bring some of these chart types conceptually in together in a responsive dashboard along with tables. So with that, I think let's leave the PowerPoint side of things and move on to taking a look at the product itself. Okay, so you can see I'm now in Excel, and the XLCubed ribbon across the top has got a couple of changes which existing customers may notice. So what used to be small multiples has become dynamic chart. Fundamentally doing the same thing, still giving you interactive charts, but with a lot more formatting and layout control and some additional improvements along the way. But the focus really today is for a subset of these charts, which we've categorized under message chart. And these are really the 10 new chart types, which have been introduced with XLCubed 10. So we've made everything balanced. But you can see we've got charts around variance, comparison, waterfalls, business scenarios. So let's take a look first of all at the very first chart type, which is absolute variance. So if I go ahead and insert a chart, you can see I've got a task pane over to the right, which allows me to design the chart. And from there, I can then essentially determine what I want to see. So if I resize it a little bit first, So this is looking at absolute variance. Typically, well, in this case, we'll do it for actual to budget. So in that case, we need to move scenario down to compare by, and we'll plot the actual and we'll compare that to the budget. And you'll see that straight away I get red and green columns, green where I'm over budget, red where I'm under budget. This is obviously based on a positive metric, an operating profit. I just want to set the report up so that it's linked to the slicers at the top. And to do that, I'm going to bring in account, and I'm going to use the slicer. And I'm also going to bring in the date fiscal. I'll move it from category in a second, but actually what I want to plot on the axis is the months. Okay, so we can see we got the 12 months. And then we'll move the date fiscal here and link it to the slicer. Okay, so you can see fairly quickly I'm able to build a data connected chart, which is going to update with the relevant slicers if I change the metric as well. And it's all hooked together. And this is an interactive chart in that I can zoom into that, hover over, get some information about the actual and budget figures, zoom back up, and it's still got the small multiple, the trellis concept, where if I was to move the, let's go for the organization, down onto columns, then in here, I can drill down through. I think I've got to go for a few levels, and eventually I'll end up with the multiple charts depicting that. So the charts are fully interactive as they were with small multiples in previous versions of XLCubed. So the other thing then around the chart is that from here, aside from being easy to build and dynamically linked to the data, we've got some formatting control. We can configure it exactly how we choose. And one of the things that we've added is the ability to format it closer to the IBCS standards using this message format option here. So you can see that will remove the vertical axis, and I've just got the data labels on the charts. So the recommendation around absolute variation is essentially that you use solid columns or solid bars. So we'd use columns if we're looking at time series data, going left to right. Maybe if we were looking at the variation by a product category, we'd have the products running vertically and bars going across to show that. The second of the chart types I want to take a look at is also around variance, but it's based on relative variance. And actually, I'll use this as an excuse to use one of the new aspects of XLCubed. So in here, we can position a chart to a specific range of Excel cells. So I can say I want the chart to fit exactly here. And you can see it will resize to fit that area exactly. So let's take this chart, copy it, and I'll paste it here. And then I actually want to reposition it so it's going to fit exactly above the chart we built to begin with. So if I do it like this, what I now want to do is have the chart on top display the relative variance, so percentage variance rather than absolute. So to do that, I can just change the chart type. All the other selections are going to be consistent, so I can just change the chart type here so that it's relative variance instead. And you can see now I've got lollipops or lolliplots, depending what you want to call them, but essentially it's worked out the variance for me without me having to add calculations. Maybe in this kind of example, I don't need the month duplicated because I can read it from the chart below. So you can see that everything consistently lines up, and I can see the absolute and the relative variance together. And the interesting series would be here, where we can see what looks like a relatively small increase over budget, but it's actually very big in percentage terms. So the combination of being able to look at absolute variance and relative variance together is actually a very powerful one, and one that's used quite a lot. And these are clearly still linked to the slicers above. So when I change everything, then everything's going to update accordingly. So let's take a look at one more chart around variance. If I copy this one and just paste it onto a new sheet, I want to take a look at a slightly different one, which may be less familiar. I think the red and green concept is easy for everyone to pick up. This is a slightly different chart type, which really is it's integrated variance, which this one looks at. And it gives you a way to display the actual and then show the variance alongside that embedded. So if I just go and add this style of formatting, you can see we've got the labels now showing me the actual value. So the solid black columns are the actual value we're reporting, which is still the selection on the previous sheet. And these charts are actually more often used for looking at variance by period. So rather than scenario, I might change this to look at the year essentially. So I'll move scenario up here, change the selection to actual, and move the fiscal date down here. And we could then compare 2019 to 2018. Okay, so you can see where we're over, where we're under. The idea is that the embedded red and green columns, the red shows you where you previously were, it's fallen down to the black. The green shows you where you previously were and it's risen up to the black. To make that direction a little bit more obvious, you can optionally configure the variance column to have an arrow which kind of shows the direction of movement, and I could position it in the center. So you can see that red indicates a fall from the previous period and green indicates a rise from the previous period. So I think these are actually very interesting. They display quite a lot of information in a small amount of space. And again, equally interactive in the same way as all the others. You can zoom in, you can hover over. If I click a column, potentially that updates other parts of the report. So moving on then to take a look at the waterfall side of things. And really we're looking for waterfalls around contribution analysis fundamentally. But again, as I mentioned earlier, in two different ways. So if we're looking here to build a waterfall chart, which looks like this one, so going from gross sales down to operating profit, just for the purposes of time, I've actually got one I started earlier. The main reason I started it earlier is because I didn't want to spend 90 seconds picking different accounts. So fundamentally with a waterfall chart, what you've got to do, pick, in this case, the accounts you'd like to see. As we're looking at structure, I've arranged this vertically, so the waterfall is done in bars rather than columns. But from here, you can see this one is not finished. I've selected the elements. I've selected a year that we are selecting, which is 2018, but the chart itself is not yet right. So what you can do here is I can signify that gross sales should clearly be a total. I can do the same thing for net sales, for gross margin, and then lastly for the operating profit. And if your numbers, depending on the sign of your numbers, if your numbers were coming in positive, and you wanted to display them as negatives, you may have noticed that's on the menu as well. So you can select an individual element and choose to negate it. So however your data is signed, you should be able to build waterfall charts using this approach relatively easily. The other thing we may want to do with this style of waterfall is because these are not deviations, they're negative numbers, but they're not deviations as such, we may want to just format those as gray. So we could say here negative, we'll make that gray. But you've got control over exactly how you want it to look and feel. And you've also got options to add a delta to show you the gap. Okay, and again, completely interactive. If you're just interested in the gross margin to operating profit, I can zoom in on that, drill down through the data, if that's the way I want to go. So that's your classic waterfall chart really, which is used, I think, in a lot of financial reporting areas. The other type of waterfall which we've added is a variance waterfall, which is a little bit different. So with the variance waterfall, if I just switch to another workbook, this is really a way of looking at 2 points in time, or potentially more, but several points in time, and looking at what is contributing to the difference between those 2 points in time. So rather than trying to describe it anymore, let's go ahead and build one. So if I choose the variance waterfall here, so I'm going to do this based on the 2 points in time. You can see initially it's made a guess, and it's presenting several years. I just want to look at 2, so I'm going to pick the 2013 and 2014. Let's go for. So if I click on the category here, we go 2013, 2014. For the measure, we'll just do sales amount is fine for the purposes of this. So you can see what this does, excuse me, initially is it will present the data, 2 totals for the years, and then in between that it will give you a lower level on the same date hierarchy. So it's given me the semester level. It would probably be more interesting if I choose the month. So you can see the breakdown now by month, and it's just growing. This essentially represents the difference between April 2014 and April 2013. So it's showing you the current value, the previous value, and the variance between the two. But what these let you do is actually, you don't have to do this fully in the context of date. It lets you analyze it by any other part of the business. So for example, if I wanted to see between 13 and 14 which products were making the difference, I could move product down onto the split by, and I could select any level of product. So if we go category, or in this case subcategory. So you can see here we've got, and I'm just going to change actually the dates that we're looking at as well. So rather than these two, I'm just going to reference this range of cells. So again, the charts are fully integrated with Excel ranges in the same way the rest of XLCubed is. So you can see now we're moving from August to September, and we can see there's some big contributors, but there's a lot of product which is not really making a great deal of difference. And potentially there's a couple of things which are problematic about the chart. The first would be the scaling. So maybe the fact that the months have got such a big total is making these very small. So in that, we could go to the properties, and we could basically set a minimum here if we preferred on the y-axis. So we could say I want the minimum to be 4 million. Okay, so now the differences are more visible, the variances are more visible. The other thing we can do is we can restrict the number of elements we're actually looking at. So we can, rather than display these, I don't know, 30 different categories, if we go into the selector for product, we can use something called outlier grouping in XLCubed, which is kind of similar to Pareto analysis, where you're really focusing on what's making the difference. So in here, we can say I want to rank a certain number and group the other outliers. So we could say top 10, let's just make it dynamic, we'll point it to this cell. So we want to see currently the top 20 items, and this is based on the absolute variance. So this will show me just the biggest absolute numbers, i.e. positives and negatives. Everything else will be grouped together as others. I'll just do that in capitals so it's a bit more visible. Okay, so you can see I've got something now that's a little bit easier to read. And in truth, if I go down to say 10, even based on the numbers 5 or 6 would be enough, you can see that all filter across. So these really are the key drivers in moving from the revenue we selected in 2014, sorry, in August through to September. So it gives you a lot of flexibility and a lot of power to be able to display that exactly how you choose. We do provide a number of other chart types that I'm not going to go through in any detail today, just based on timing, but we provide something based on the scenario, the business scenario, which will pre-format the actual and the forecast as you need to, and will change over time. So you can quickly see one to the other, and plan will be formatted separately as well. We also provide trend comparison, which is really, again, I guess, looking at the variance over 2 time periods. So in this case, we're looking at year on year. The difference really is that given these are line charts, we can clearly see in green where the current year is higher, and in red where it's lower. We can hover over a data point, but we can also get a better idea of the actual trend rather than the specific variances at a point in time. So these are really intended to show you the trend. If we're interested, if I switch the selection here for bikes, you can see everything updates a little bit. If we're just interested in Canada, I can keep just that one chart potentially as well, and then explore Canada by itself a little bit further. Okay, so those are some of the key chart types that we've introduced. I went through reasonably quickly, but it's more to show you the basics of building them and give you an idea of the capability. So what I'd like to do now is pass over to Catherine, who's going to show you a little bit in terms of how you can bring these together in a fully responsive dashboard environment. So Catherine, over to you.
Great, thank you, Gary. Yes, so I'd just like to walk you through how we can be using these charts in a dashboard. So if you've been using XLCubed for a while, you may have used dashboard sheets before. But what you can see now is an example of a financially focused dashboard that we've put together. So it uses a combination of a few of the chart types that you've seen. So for the purpose of demonstrating this, we're going to walk through a simplified example. So I'm going to open up in Excel here. So this is a very simple dashboard. I've got a few components already in place. Being on a dashboard sheet, everything is linked together. So if I make a few changes to some selections here, I see that my charts and my table update. I can make some selections on this chart here, and I see the numbers update on my table. This chart here is a small multiple chart, so it's just a singular component, but it's showing the breakdown by division of the contribution to the income by quarter between the years 2018 and 2019. So in this space here, we'd like to add another finance chart that's going to help us better visualize how our actuals have varied from our budget for the year. So to do that, I'm going to go into design mode for the dashboard. I'm going to select the area that I want to place my chart and insert a dynamic chart from the ribbon. So you'll see that there are already a few hierarchies that have already been placed in this task pane. And this is because that I've got auto linking turned on by default for my dashboard. So I don't need to make any changes for there to be interactivity with this chart. So if I look into the member selection for this hierarchy, I can see that it's automatically picking the dashboard selection. So for this chart, I want to show a breakdown of the budget variance by month. So to do that, I'm going to move my dates just into my filters. I want the chart type to be an integrated variance. And then I want to be showing my months on the categories. And then I'm going to show the variance between my actuals and the budgets. So you can see straight away we've got a fairly good looking chart. I'm going to do a little bit of formatting while I'm here, just so it looks the same as the rest of my dashboard. So I'm going to make it use the message formatting. I'm also going to remove the border just so it integrates nicely. So now if I come out of design mode to view my dashboard, We can see as the screen resized there, the charts also resize to fill the space. And if I start clicking around on my dashboard, start making some selections, we can see that the chart is also updating. So if I pick a particular division that I want to look at, we can see here that the chart refreshed. I've inserted a label which is telling me what I'm viewing. I can also click on a particular quarter and I'm going to see only the months for those quarters. And this chart itself is also dynamic and interactive. So if I click on one of these columns, it's also going to now filter this table so we can see that we're now only viewing the data for the month of August. So another key aspect that I've briefly mentioned already regarding dashboards is the ability to resize and fit whatever screen you're viewing on. So I'm currently viewing this on a fairly widescreen monitor, but it's quite possible that I might want to view it on a laptop, say. So we can see that if I were to minimize my window here to a more laptop-sized screen, everything has positioned itself and resized to fit the screen. This is great for a laptop, but perhaps even for a smaller screen, perhaps a tablet or mobile, this is going to end up looking a bit too cramped and not suitable. So for that, we can define different targets, meaning that we can customize different layouts for different screen sizes. So to do that, we would have to go back into our designer. I've pre-configured a tablet portrait target here, so I'm going to select that. And we can see that we've got a space that I wanted to place my charts. So I'm just going to select that, find the chart in my items. So I'm going to remove it from its current position and place it back in. So if you were planning on using this on a tablet or mobile, you would probably want to publish this report to the web. So you would go into your XLCubed ribbon and select publish, connect to your website and publish to the relevant folder. So I've already done that. So I'm going to go back into my XLCubed web and open up the report here. So we can see we've got exactly the same layout as we did in Excel. Everything remains interactive. I can click through and get the same behavior. But also if I were to resize my screen to something more like a mobile or tablet, I've now got that different layout that we defined. So everything is being stacked vertically and I can scroll through to see all the elements. Okay, that's all I wanted to show you. So I'm going to pass back to Gary.
Great, thanks, Catherine. So we have had a couple of questions during the call. I know we're near the time, so let me just run through them. And I also want to just put a final PowerPoint on the screen, so bear with me 1 second. There we go. Okay, so we've only had a few questions come through and we are close to the time, but for any others, please do email us at info@xlcubed.com, or if you're already in contact, email us to support. So one of the questions was around the data sources. So we showed this today connecting to analysis services. It will work on, if you're connecting to powerbi.com or SAP HANA, Essbase, TM1, any of those type of environments, but you can also use these against relational SQL environments. So you would build a pivot view in XLCubed, if you're aware of those, to connect through to SQL and use it on SQL. Someone else asked about the existing reports which are using the older version of small multiples. Those will work. Those will just open up and work in version 10. So there's no requirement to do any conversion or anything like that. I think that there were a few other questions that were asked early in the session which got answered on the way through, from what I can see, around data labels and things like that. But otherwise, I think that's been it. So please, as I mentioned, any other questions, feel free to email us. If you'd like to try version 10, if you're not an existing customer, downloadable from the website. We're happy to arrange any more detailed demonstrations. If you're an existing customer, you can upgrade as part of your maintenance. You shouldn't need to convert, well, you will not need to convert existing reports. So I hope that's been useful. We certainly feel it adds a lot to XLCubed, and it's an area we're going to continue to develop. We will get the product officially certified by IBCS, and once that's done, I think we'll look to create some additional webinars around sharing best practice in a little bit more detail. So thanks very much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day and stay safe. Bye.